Hello and welcome to Cats and Hats Crochet. I have my chai, so please grab a hot drink, grab your favorite snack, and come join me. I'm going to talk about myself and what this channel is going to be about. This whole thing is a little bit scary for me in general, just because I tend to be very critical of myself, and I worry about being misunderstood. I worry about people judging or not believing me that I'm autistic, even though I've been professionally diagnosed. And yeah, it's just scary. I'm way more critical of myself than I am of other people. I love watching YouTube content put out there by autistic creators. And honestly, that's kind of how I discovered that I was autistic. I watched an autistic creator making a video about their experience, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. They described some of my experiences that I have kind of just held in and have been embarrassed about and ashamed of for so long, for my entire life. There are parts of me that I thought needed to be hidden because they weren't right. They weren't up to speed with other people. Now I know that they weren't up to a neurotypical level, which is because I'm autistic. What I'm talking about, I know I'm being really vague, but a big one for me was social skills. As an adult now, I'm really good at masking. I'm really good at acting like I have good social skills. And I think I just come across as a little bit shy and maybe a bit quirky, and maybe a bit awkward, but it's something I've struggled with for a really long time, and it's taken a lot for me to get to where I am today and to be able to mask and come across as neurotypical, which is absolutely a privilege, but also has been kind of traumatic because I wish I didn't have to. I wish I had known I was autistic and that I didn't need to hold myself to a neurotypical standard, and then I could just be myself. So if you're watching this and you know me in real life, most of the people I'm close to know that I'm autistic, but there's also people that don't know I'm autistic, and it's not because I didn't want to tell you. It's that either we don't talk regularly or we do talk regularly and I'm just nervous, and it just hasn't really been a great time, been the perfect time to bring it up, because like I said, I worry about people not believing me, and I know that I shouldn't worry about it because who cares if somebody doesn't believe me? It's not gonna affect me. And I think most of the people I know that I've told, if they don't believe me, they haven't told me to my face, so that's fine. And yeah, it's definitely something I'll talk about more. I'd be happy to make more videos about being autistic if that's something that you're interested in. And if you are, I'd love it if you commented below and let me know. I kind of feel like this is my first video, so I don't know who is gonna see it. I don't know if anyone's gonna see it. So if you do see it and you're like, I'm autistic too, or I'm interested in learning more about autism, I would love it if you commented below. So this video is supposed to be not just an introduction, but also showing you some of the things I've made, some of the crochet items I've made. I felt like that would help me in my first video to also talk about one of my special interests. When you're autistic, a lot of times, not all the time, but a lot of times you have an intense special interest, and that is another thing And when I found out I was autistic, really clicked into place for me. I was like, is that why I get so obsessed about things? Which again was another thing that I felt ashamed about. I guess it doesn't maybe sound like something that someone would be ashamed about, but I was, because special interests take up so much time. And I know I had loved ones that were a little bit confused as to why I was so obsessive. I know obsessive is kind of a negative term, but so I don't really like to use it usually, but I had loved ones that were wondering why I was so obsessive about certain things and learning about new things, and how I would just deep dive into them and just had to learn everything about them. And in fact, I would often put off things that I needed to do in order to spend more time with my special interest. That's also been something that's hard for me. It's hard when your focus is like pinpointed on one thing, and you can't change your focus to something else. So, and on that note, ADHD is something that I've been told I might have. My autism evaluation didn't include an ADHD evaluation. It was more like an ADHD screening. And my psychologist said that she thought I would have ADHD, or that I had ADHD, or have. My psychologist thinks that I have ADHD, but was saying that going on medication possibly would be a good way to confirm if I am an ADHDer as well, which would make me ADHD. But I feel like my autism is more dominant. Autism, and if you don't know, autism and ADHD tend to play off each other and tend to mask each other. And I feel like in my case, autism definitely does. And I as a kid, for example, was not a classic ADHDer, I would say. I was not the bouncing off the walls, quote unquote, kid, which I think is a stereotype of ADHD. See, I'm not as well versed in ADHD, so if I say something that's like totally off, I apologize. But I definitely had trouble focusing. But again, it was just anything that I deemed wrong, quote unquote wrong, I tended to try to hide. So I remember having trouble focusing, but it was not something I was willing to bring up or discuss. I kind of thought it was normal. I knew a lot of my inner experiences weren't necessarily normal, but I either kind of brushed them off as being like quirks or things that I needed to improve. For example, like the social skills, like I really thought that was just something I needed to work on. And pretty much every social interaction, I would overthink it and think about what I would say next time, or what I would do next time, or yeah. And it's always been hard for me to make friends, especially friendships that last. I tend to have a lot of situational friendships. And it's not that those situational friendships, like for example, if you're one of those situational friends, I think about you all the time. No, not all the time. That sounds creepy. I often think about those situational friendships that I've had, and I look back on them really fondly and wish that I was still in touch with those people, but I don't know how to. I often fall away from friendships just because I have a very intense fear of talking on the phone. Which sounds so stupid, but I do. I have a really intense fear of talking on the phone. And that's a key way that people stay in touch. I mean, yes, there's texting, but when you are long distance from someone, that's not always the way that they prefer to keep in touch. One of the things that led me to discovering that I'm autistic is anxiety. I'm also diagnosed with an anxiety disorder because autism kind of, at least the way my psychologist explained it to me, autism kind of just comes along. Anxiety just kind of comes along with autism. Maybe not all the time, but oftentimes. It's a very common comorbidity. But I was diagnosed with an anxiety disorder on top of that. And that's kind of why I sought help in the first place. After both my kids, I had a lot of postpartum anxiety. My first birth was pretty traumatic. And so I kind of thought that was the cause of my anxiety. And so I went to therapy and we did EMDR to work on that. This was after my second kid. I didn't go to therapy after my first kid, which I should have. But after my second kid, I recognized the anxiety and was like, I'm gonna go get help this time. So I did. I went to see my therapist, and we did the EMDR. And when that was finished, she was talking about, what else we could work on. And anxiety was pretty much always the theme of things that I wanted to work on. I said that I have struggled with anxiety my entire life. And she's like, okay. And I said, especially social anxiety. And I had never said that out loud before. In fact, it took me until adulthood, until I had my first kid, to even realize that what I had experienced my whole life was anxiety. And I hadn't put the word social anxiety together until that therapy appointment. And when I said that, I felt this little bit of a release, like a little bit of relief that I had actually put words to it, because that's really hard for me to recognize what I'm feeling and to process what I'm feeling. I definitely struggle with alexithymia, which is difficulty recognizing your emotions and interpreting them. I then went home from that therapy appointment and started Googling social anxiety. I have always, maybe not always, but ever since adulthood, I've searched for validation, external validation, because I think because I feel different and misunderstood a lot of times, and that I have so much trouble putting words to my feelings and emotions, that when I can find validation in what I'm feeling, if I read like a meme or something on the internet and I'm like, that is exactly how I'm feeling, it just feels so good. It's like, I can't even describe it. It's just this feeling of relief. Like I'm not alone, So that's what I was doing, was I was Googling social anxiety, and I eventually came across a video about a woman who was late diagnosed with autism. And I've worked with autistic people. If you know me, you know that I've worked with autistic people in my line of work, and people with all different disabilities, not just autism. But I felt kind of gypped, or stupid. because how could I have worked with autistic people for that many years and not realize that I was autistic? And I know the answer to that now is that the way autism is portrayed in the media and the way that we're taught, like the old information about autism, which is what I was taught when I was in college, is very different than, I mean, not that some people don't present that way, which would be, so the old information about autism is often based off of young white males. And so that obviously leaves out a large portion of the population. And I obviously did not realize that. There's also a lot of misinformation about autism out there. And so in that video, I learned about people that are high masking. And a lot of times high masking people are not always women or non-binary folks, or like cis women. But there seems to be kind of like a certain presentation where the person is high masking. And, you know, as autistic people, we are really good at looking for patterns. That's definitely one of my strengths. And I was always looking for patterns when it came to socialization. I was always watching, I was always mimicking, copying what other people said in social situations. I was like a chameleon, like trying to become like the person I was interacting with, not necessarily to deceive them or anything like that. That's the only way I knew that that person would like me and that I could have a relationship with them, be friends with them. And so it kind of left me not really knowing who I was. And yeah, and that moment, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this has been my life. I've also learned so much more about myself besides just that I'm autistic. I've learned that because of my anxiety, which isn't diagnosed as a social anxiety disorder, but I definitely have a ton of anxiety around socialization. But I've learned that one of the things I struggle with is going like mute. And when I say going mute, I don't mean I think some people literally cannot talk, and that's part of selective mutism. But and I experienced that level probably more like in school, but a lot of times if a teacher talked to me, I could talk and I would answer because I was afraid of getting in trouble for not answering. And so I had this really intense need to people please, which I'm still working on to this day. But I would never voluntarily speak, unless I do remember playing with friends and talking to friends at recess. So I would speak at those times. But it still kind of happens to me when I have a social battery that drains very quickly, and I often will be very outgoing seeming. I might not very outgoing, but I can, when I'm working really, really hard to mask, I can seem somewhat outgoing. But that drains my battery really, really fast. And so a lot of times I'll end up starting out a social interaction or gathering talkative and get quieter and quieter until I'm just kind of dissociating in the corner. One other thing I wanted to mention is that autism has helped me realize that I would have what are called meltdowns, and also shutdowns, which is the dissociating in the corner that that I referred to. But meltdowns for me would be I felt like I was on an emotional roller coaster, and I would often wonder if I must be bipolar, because I would struggle with going from being okay, which my definition of okay was kind of rocky at best. Not that I was never okay. I mean, there were, times that I've had a good life. I'm not saying that my life has completely sucked, but and I'm speaking more from an being an adult standpoint than my childhood right now. But I would go along, being seemingly okay, and I felt like all of a sudden I would just have these like plunges into dark places. And sometimes it would come out as anger. Sometimes I would kind of hold it in more, and it would become it would be irritability, which would probably later come out a little more explosively. Or it would be like intense, like just lots of crying, or just feeling like I was in a really dark place while crying. And it's interesting, when I found out I was autistic, I felt like I had a lot more meltdowns, but I think it was a combination of like, this is me and I can let it out. And now I have some strategies for when I do feel like I need to let it out. And I think it was also just a lot of emotions processing, learning that I'm autistic, and I felt really sad for my former self, I felt really sad that they had gone through life thinking that they were broken. Yeah, I've always had very low self-esteem because of that, and yeah, it's something I'm trying to work on for sure. And I'm hoping that when I make these videos that I can watch them back and give myself the grace that I give other autistic YouTubers that I see. When I see other autistic YouTubers, all I see is somebody that's amazingly authentic, and I think about how grateful I am that they're willing to be vulnerable. And I want to be able to do that. And I want to be able to do that and not just look back at myself and think about how stupid I sound or how stupid I look, or, judge all those things about myself. I'm hoping that I can learn to love myself. That's kind of the journey I'm on. I remember after I found out I was autistic, I thought to myself, I think I was recording one of my podcasts. I have a podcast, by the way, which I'll link below. But I said in one of my podcasts that I think I actually like myself, and that was big. So I'm working on it. I'm definitely working on it. So thank you for watching. This was not at all the video that I meant to record. I wanted to keep it more lighthearted and talk about crochet. But we'll do that in the next one. And I so appreciate you watching. I'm hoping that this YouTube channel brings connection, brings an opportunity for me to express myself. And yeah, thanks. See you in the next one.